Hi everyone, welcome to another installment of Terrifying Trios. Our theme this time is perhaps the most unsettling, frightening thing that the average person will ever face. I'm talking about love. Yes, love and romance are marketed, especially this time of year, as the be-all, end-all source of happiness, but reality and fiction often reveal a darker side. Content warning. The following books and movies contain graphic violence, including murder, the removal and replacement of body parts, disfigurement, drowning, the dead returning to life, bones, structures made out of bones, bloody injuries, implied suicide, and more. Viewer and reader discretion is advised. And as always, this recording from this point on contains spoilers for this month's titles, though, as is usually the case, I don't give you all the details of our book. I find it easier to recap the events of a movie than all the story beats of a 350-page novel. Our first film is The Phantom of the Opera. Starring Lon Chaney Sr., this film turns 100 years old this year, and it's still a haunting adaptation of the classic tale written by Gaston Leroux. First, we see the shadow of the Phantom underground, and then we move to the surface world, where the Paris Opera House is full of dancing and music. This is a silent film, so the opera is implied. Upstairs in the offices, we see a quartet of gentlemen making a business deal. The current owners are selling the Paris Opera House to two men, and on their way out, they mention the Phantom. Understandably, these two wealthy businessmen laugh, saying, "We are not children." But the outgoing owners, clearly relieved to have gotten through the sale, say that the person in box 5 won't laugh about the Phantom. Sure enough, when the new owners go to check, they see the figure of a man wearing a cloak with a tall collar, but when they look again, he has disappeared. This unsettles both men, but of course, seeing this strange figure is just the beginning of their troubles. Next we meet Christine Daae, the understudy of Carlotta, the star at the Paris Opera House. She performs one night after Carlotta is ill. Carlotta's mother had previously stormed into the office of the owners of the opera house, defiantly wielding a letter from the Phantom, which instructed Carlotta to bow out. Though she insisted her daughter would perform, perhaps Carlotta herself is afraid of the Phantom, and so Christine takes her place. After the performance, Leroux, a handsome young comte, goes looking for Christine, and she tells him that they can no longer be together. Then she hears a voice coming from behind a wall of her dressing room. The shadow of the Phantom tells her that he will call for her soon. Christine, seemingly almost hypnotized, promises that she will be waiting. Leroux seems to overhear this, and he leaves, seemingly both heartbroken and suspicious of his possible romantic rival. Later, Carlotta's mother shows the opera house owners another letter from the Phantom, and once again, she insists that Carlotta will perform. As they're seeing her out, the Phantom's hand emerges from a hidden passage in the wall, and he leaves a note for the owners. In it, he promises that if they allow Carlotta to perform instead of Christine, disaster will follow. And how would they like to run their business in a cursed opera house? However, the performance with Carlotta in the starring role goes on. At first, the owners watch confidently from box seats. The opera appears to be sold out. Not bad for a cursed house, one of the men says. But then the lights begin to flicker. The chandelier that illuminates the opera begins to swing violently, and then it falls, presumably killing several people. In the confusion following this disaster, Christine hears the Phantom's voice in her dressing room again. Unbeknownst to her, Leroux was in the audience and has hidden himself in her room. The Phantom controls the mirror in the dressing room, causing it to open like a sliding door, and Christine goes into the secret passage. Leroux tries to follow, but he can't get the mechanism to open the mirror again. In the shadows of the world within the walls of the Paris Opera House, Christine finally sees the owner of the voice, the Phantom. Upon seeing the mask of the Phantom, all of Christine's wonder turns to horror. It's a surprisingly emotive mask, but it's unsettling, with only the eyes and chin of the Phantom showing. And Christine only reluctantly follows her heretofore invisible advisor deep below the opera house. After climbing down many stairs and taking a quick boat ride, the sets in this movie are huge and impressive, Christine sees the Phantom's home, which boasts a main chamber with an organ, a room for Christine herself, and the Phantom's room, where his bed is a coffin. Christine has, of course, finally realized that her mysterious friend is the Phantom. He tells her that his name is Eric, and that if he is the Phantom, it's only because men's hatred has made him so. After seeing and hearing all this, Christine faints, and the Phantom lays her on top of her lavish new bed. When she wakes up, she reads a letter the Phantom has slipped under the door, explaining that she will be safe as long as she never touches his mask, and that, having previously declared his love for her, she can love him if she can see the man within Eric and overlook his mask. Leaving her room, Christine finds Eric playing the organ. He is still masked, and Christine can't resist doing exactly what the letter told her not to do. She pulls off Eric's mask from behind, revealing his face. Apparently, Lon Chaney himself came up with the makeup for the Phantom. It's a disturbing visage, with an exaggerated nose and teeth, and Christine is repulsed. The Phantom is angry, and covers his face in apparent despair. He tells Christine that she can go back up to perform in the opera, but if she sees Raoul again, he will kill them both. She agrees, and then writes to Raoul, asking him to meet her at the upcoming masked ball. At the ball, Christine and Raoul find each other in spite of their masks, and hurry away together. At this point, the Phantom appears, dressed in red and wearing a skull-faced mask that frightens the other partygoers. Christine and Raoul go up to the roof of the opera, and believing they're alone, they make plans to run away to England together after Christine's performance the following day. High above them, on a massive statue of a horse and rider, the Phantom overhears this, and begins to plan. The next day, Raoul comforts a frightened Christine before she performs, but then she is kidnapped after the Phantom plunges the theater into darkness. Before this, the body of a worker is discovered, hanging backstage, and his brother, Simon, declares that he will avenge his brother's death. And since this is a Universal horror movie, Simon is true to his word, and spends the rest of the film gathering a torch-wielding mob. Meanwhile, a man who's been hanging around the theater approaches Raoul, claiming to know the Phantom's secrets. Rather than a confederate of Eric, he turns out to be a secret policeman named Leroux, and the pair of men make their way into the secret passage in Christine's dressing room before cautiously descending to find her. They eventually find their way to the exterior of Eric's home. Paris, we are given to understand, is built on not just the famous catacombs, but many secret dungeons and torture chambers. Unhappily for Raoul, his brother has also gone underground, hoping to help him. Using a hollow pole to breathe, Eric sneaks up on Raoul's brother by moving underwater and drowns him. Next, he traps Raoul and Leroux in a room full of mirrors that rapidly heats up. They manage to escape this room through a trapdoor, but then they find themselves trapped in a room full of barrels of gunpowder. Then the Phantom gives Christine a choice. If she turns a knob shaped like a scorpion, she will save the two men. If she turns another knob, this one shaped like a grasshopper, the entire Paris Opera House will explode, presumably with the help of the gunpowder room. Christine actually seems to scare the Phantom a bit here. Her hand hovers over the grasshopper before turning the scorpion instead, and Raoul and Leroux find that the room they're trapped in is rapidly filling with water. Christine begs the Phantom to save their lives, and he agrees, opening a hidden seam in the floor and pulling Raoul to safety. Christine runs to Raoul, grateful he's alive, and Eric, furious, pulls her away. As all of this is happening, the angry mob is approaching. They've found their way underground, and when Eric sees them, he flees above ground with Christine, pushing her into the carriage that Raoul had waiting to take them away. The angry mob in this movie gets a ton of cardio. They run through the hidden bowels of the Paris Opera House, then through the streets of Paris, and finally, Christine leaps from the moving carriage and is saved by Raoul from being trampled by the mob. The Phantom is finally caught, and though we don't see him killed, the mob descends on him in arguably the scariest scene in this movie, where he disappears beneath a crush of bodies before his corpse is thrown into the river. This is where the movie ends. It bears noting that when the novel that this movie was based upon was written, author Gaston Leroux had heard rumors of something haunting the Paris Opera House. There was an actual chandelier collapse that killed someone, and the story's lake, where Eric has a boat, is a cistern that really does exist. As far as horror goes, this tale is based on some really interesting facts. Not to be flip, but if you are the sort of person that enjoyed the Home Alone movies, but wished Kevin McAllister's traps were more deadly, this is exactly that movie. How do the Phantom's traps always work? Don't worry about the logic of it, they just do. And while the Phantom's love for Christine is very much one-sided, the love between Christine and Raoul is actually very sweet. Raoul is clearly wealthy, but he isn't as arrogant as many horror movie leading men. Instead, he seems to genuinely support Christine's talent and wish to succeed in opera. One of the most lavish productions of the silent film era, over a century later, this remains a compelling and entertaining movie. I give this film 3.5 organ solos out of 5. Our second film this month is 2024's Lisa Frankenstein. Our protagonist here is Lisa Swallows. Yes, that's really her name. A teenager who lives with her dad, stepmom, and stepsister, Taffy. Lisa likes to hang out in the overgrown local cemetery, reading books and tending the grave of a handsome young man who died sometime in the 19th century. She's also grieving the death of her mother, who was killed by an axe murderer who was never caught after committing this heinous crime. Taffy explains this plot point to her friends, but this movie is a romantic comedy that just happens to be about murder, and thus the one sad murder of the movie is never resolved. Taffy, who tells Lisa that she looks pale before they attend a party, insists that her stepsister try out the tanning bed she won in a beauty pageant. Taffy is comic relief, but in her own way, she really does try to include Lisa and show she cares for her, which Lisa acknowledges before the film ends. In the next scene, Lisa learns that the tanning bed has the ability to electrocute those who lie inside it, but she isn't killed, just singed. At the party, Lisa talks to her crush, Michael Trent, and in trying to impress him, downs a cup of something containing PCP. Then, while extremely high, she is nearly sexually assaulted by her lab partner, Josh. Lisa leaves the party, and at home, breaks the bathroom mirror in frustration. It's at this point that the young man's grave she's been tending is struck by lightning. The next day, Lisa's stepmom, Janet, whose house the family lives in, lectures Lisa about the broken mirror, and Lisa agrees to work an extra shift at her job. She works at a dry cleaner's that also does hemming and other sewing tasks to replace the mirror. She sees her crush again, who stops by with a garment to be cleaned, is insulted by her boss, then comes home to find the rest of the family getting ready to go out and see the film Look Who's Talking, because this movie takes place in 1989. Lisa elects to stay home and watches a horror movie on TV. And then there's a knock on the door. It is at this point that the creature appears. The creature is covered in dirt and mud, and as it pursues Lisa, breaking a window and then chasing her through the house, you can understand her terror. Neighbors watch Lisa being chased across the front yard, but they dismiss her as being odd and praise Taffy's looks. Finally, when Lisa is getting ready to beat the creature over the head with a golf club, she notices that the creature is wearing a rosary, her mother's rosary, which Lisa left on her favorite grave. Now more amazed than horrified, Lisa helps the creature shower and invites him to find clean clothes in her closet. Of course, she can't hide the broken window or other evidence of the creature chasing her when the family returns from the movie. Janet is convinced that Lisa is responsible for the damage and is lying for attention. And to be fair, the person she describes as having broken into the house to rob it does sound like the Hamburglar. The next day, Lisa and Taffy go to school, and at the creature's insistence, Lisa wears a black hat with a pink flower on it. She talks to Michael Trent, who Taffy says is bad news, but Lisa is still smitten. Meanwhile, the creature mostly stays in Lisa's closet during the day, but emerges just long enough to spit up a worm into Janet's lunch. Later, when Lisa gets home, Janet confronts her about this, blaming her for the worm, and announces that Lisa is going to be admitted as an inpatient at the psychiatric hospital where Janet works. Then the creature emerges from the closet and hits Janet in the head with Lisa's sewing machine. We know by now that he's missing both an ear and a hand, and so the creature cuts off Janet's left ear, and Lisa sews it back on, after they dispose of the corpse. Luckily, Janet was supposed to be attending a conference in Milwaukee, so her absence isn't immediately remarked upon. At first, the creature's new ear doesn't work. Then Lisa thinks about Taffy's tanning bed, and after putting the creature inside for a bit, his replacement ear works, and the creature looks less gaunt. The next day at school, Lisa has borrowed one of Taffy's shirts, and she's feeling more confident, both because it seems Michael is finally noticing her, and because after leaving a note in Josh's locker, he meets her after school. They go to the cemetery, and on the way he says, "Aren't you going to hold my hand?" She asks him to do what he did at the party, at which point the creature, hiding in an open grave, grabs Josh's ankles and pulls him to the ground. At this point, Josh's right hand is cut off with a hatchet, and Lisa grabs it, saying, "I'll hold your freaking hand." The creature is unimpressed by this line, but like Lisa, I enjoyed it. The creature throws the hatchet into Josh's back as he attempts to flee, and he dies. Then Lisa and the creature return home after hiding the second body. Lisa uses her sewing prowess to attach Josh's hand to the creature, and she once again places him in the tanning bed. Again, he emerges looking more alive, and he actually smiles upon seeing that he has 2 working hands again. Back in the house, the creature eagerly shows off his skills at playing piano. He plays an REO Speedwagon song, and Lisa sings along. Then he starts to cry, presumably thinking of the murder of Josh, and Lisa insists that he stop, both because she considers the deaths of Janet and Josh as justifiable, and also because the creature's tears smell horrible. Later, Lisa watches TV with her dad and Taffy, and after going up to her room, Taffy joins her and almost discovers the creature in the closet. Taffy has tried calling Janet, but she wasn't at her hotel. Lisa tries to console her stepsister, insisting that they have no proof that anything is wrong. And while Taffy and Lisa's father call the police, Lisa and the creature experiment with the back massager that Lisa's aunt gave her as a gift. Afterward, Lisa reveals that she doesn't fear death, but she wants to be with Michael, the boy she's in lust with, before she dies. The creature, still nonverbal, makes noncommittal sounds, which Lisa interprets as support for her plan, and he turns off the bedside light. The next day, Lisa dons a dress that Taffy apparently wore as a Halloween costume. Taffy, worried about Janet, is crying, and Lisa offers to drive them to school. Though still clearly unsettled, Taffy says that Lisa's boobs look good in the dress. Can you tell I genuinely love this positive portrayal of stepsisters? At school, Taffy tells her friends that she's too upset to stay at school. After all, the police are there, investigating Josh's disappearance. So Taffy skips, and Lisa says she'll walk home. However, Michael isn't in class, and Lisa is called to the principal's office, where 2 police officers are waiting. Michael's friend, who has the locker next to Josh's, says that Lisa was going to meet Josh the afternoon he disappeared. Though Lisa is allowed to leave the office, she can tell that things are beginning to spiral out of control. So she starts walking and finds the creature a few blocks away driving Janet's car. Lisa's dad called the house about seeing the car, and the creature went and found it, killing a neighbor in the process. Yes, he somehow knows how to drive. Lisa recognizes that they will soon be caught, so she tells the creature to drive her to Michael's house. Determined to finally seduce her crush, Lisa opens the unlocked front door, goes upstairs, and finds Michael in bed with Taffy. Furious, Lisa yells at both of them, and then the creature enters and kills Michael with the hatchet, but not before cutting off his penis. This scene, set to On the Wings of Love, is as funny as it is horrifying. Taffy is understandably traumatized, and while Lisa helps her into her car, the creature drives away, and she follows. She apologizes to Taffy before following the creature. It turns out he left the hatchet stuck in the bumper of Janet's car, so Lisa takes it with her. In the graveyard, because that's where the creature is waiting, Lisa moves to strike him, but the hatchet falls from her hand. She realizes that she loves him and that he loves her too. So they go back to her house, and after a bit more sewing and a quick trip to the tanning bed, the pair consummate their love. Then Lisa gets into the tanning bed and instructs the creature to turn it to max bronze, which causes it to spark and shake violently. She leaves the creature a note. Death is temporary, but I love you forever. Later, Lisa's dad returns home to find the neighbors standing in his yard, watching as the shed that housed the tanning bed is consumed by fire. The next scene takes place in a different cemetery than the one we've seen so far in this movie. Taffy and Lisa's dad are visiting the grave of Lisa Swallows, and though Taffy is unnerved, she doesn't mention that someone has carved beloved wife into Lisa's headstone. Next, we hear the creature's voice for the first time. He's reading to a bandaged Lisa, who's lying next to him on a bench, and as he finishes, she opens her eyes, now clearly undead in the same way he is. How does this work, you ask? Don't worry, it just does. There are some genuinely funny moments in this movie, like when Taffy proclaims that Lisa doesn't have to worry because her mom's already been murdered. And though her mother's death is usually a punchline, Lisa's grief is her primary motivator. At one point, she muses that people told her, after the murder, that time heals all wounds. But she declares that time is the wound, because it takes you further and further from the place where you were happy. Though she grows closer to the creature as the movie goes on, for most of the film, Lisa is focused on Michael, who barely seems to know she exists. It's only when the creature kills Michael, and removes a body part he just happens to be missing, that she realizes how she feels about him, and how he feels about her. Which worked for me. There's a difference between lusting after someone you barely know and falling in love with someone you do know. This is the sort of story that makes you think, yes, this is a messy relationship, but at least these particular weirdos found each other and get to make a mess of life and death together. I give this film, which I think has definite cult classic potential, 3 stolen body parts out of 5. Our book this month is Under the Surface, a 2024 novel by Diana Urban. Here's my review of the book, which, like The Phantom of the Opera, mostly takes place beneath the streets of Paris. Ruby is in Paris for her senior class trip. With her is her new best friend Val, her ex-best friend Selena, top student Olivia, and Sean, who helps Ruby edit her travel videos for YouTube, and who's also her crush. Both hope they might get closer on this trip, though Ruby is worried about messing up their friendship or getting her heart broken. Sean knows that his father expects him to join the military after high school, but right now he's just trying to be there for Ruby, as a friend, but maybe something more. Then, their first night in the city, Val gets a text from a French boy named Julien, and she sneaks out to meet him at a party. Not wanting Val to get sent home or murdered by a stranger, Ruby sets off to find her, and Selena and Olivia end up coming along. It's then that the nature of the party is revealed. It's being held in the Paris catacombs. Ruby is intrigued, because this subterranean world, full of millions of human bones, could help her next travel video go viral. So, Ruby and her friends follow Julien, and soon they're lost in the dark with the dead and something else. Back on the surface, Sean is determined to find the girl he might be in love with, but will Ruby and the others ever see daylight again? This tale of underground horror is an entertaining thrill ride. I've talked in a previous episode about my love for the film As Above, So Below, so as far as settings go, I'm obviously a fan of the Paris catacombs. This story is told in alternating chapters, although Ruby chapters are often back-to-back, so we spend more time underground than above ground with the frantic Sean. And though Ruby and her classmates are being pursued underground in dark and claustrophobic spaces, and this is certainly scary, many of the chilling scenes here are based on the fact that they are in a real place that exists, and that it's really filled with unconventional, and at times disturbing displays of real human bones. The specter of death looms large here, because death is literally all around them, and the characters know they might not survive their ordeal. But now, let's talk about love. It comes in many forms, and though all of the stories I've discussed here are unsettling, they are also centered around couples and love. How these love stories might end is impossible to say. We meet these characters as they are falling in love and trying to find a way to be together, whether that means overcoming the obstacle of physical distance, a romantic rival, or their own fears about love and loss. While all of these stories have relatively happy endings, part of the reason people enjoy romance fiction is because, in real life, that often isn't the case. And there are few things more frightening than the prospect of heartache. Still, fiction reminds us that love is possible, even in seemingly impossible circumstances, and that's a fine thought indeed. Just try to avoid a surplus of dead bodies. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back again soon with another terrifying trio.